going?
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside to Action. I'm happy to be joined in just a moment by Josh Remington, who's going to introduce himself. But before, I always like to share with people, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about TalkShop, the programs that are for high school students, or the programs and our one-on-one coaching for college students, please. The website will be on your screen shortly. Reach out. I'm happy to share a conversation with you at any time. That being said, I'd like to welcome in my guest today, Josh Remington. You can see from behind him what he is doing and who he is doing it with. But instead of just assuming, let's have Josh speak for himself. Josh, thanks for joining. Can you just share, just to get us going, your title and who you work with?
Yeah, Matt, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. Always excited to be talking about these sorts of things. Again, my name is Josh Remington. I'm currently the Director of Marketing for the SMU Mustangs within the American Conference here in Dallas, Texas. Been here just over a year in that position.
Got it. And the question I always like to just kind of get someone going is, was there a point, Josh, in your background, if you want to think back to maybe it was something in high school, maybe it was earlier, I don't know, or maybe it was something in your college days where you yourself realized that, you know what, the skill of being able to articulate who you are or be able to talk clearly and confidently, regardless of who it was with, you thought, man, this is going to be an important skill for me. Was there anything or any one event or a series of events that made you come to that realization?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting for me. I really truly feel like that opportunity and that learning experience came pretty early in my college days. So I started as a freshman at Grace College in 2010. And my second semester, actually, I think where I learned a lot of this initially was through my part-time job at a hardware store, oddly enough. So spent 2.5 years working at a hardware store, and that taught me a lot about time management, customer service, but also communication. Being able to articulate to customers, fellow coworkers, things that needed to be done, how they needed to happen. And so while that's not necessarily from a professional standpoint now in athletics, it certainly led into that. As I got into the middle part of my college years there, it certainly kind of gave me that next step into understanding, okay, I was able to experience this from a retail part-time job standpoint, but when it came to really starting to understand what it was I was looking to do next and who I wanted to engage with, that certainly became more important. And so I really credit that early time in that part-time job. But I think for me, a lot of that developed over the course of volunteering for events in college. And so I started as a freshman into my sophomore year, really looking for ways to get involved in the industry. And by doing those things, intermixing with different individuals, and whether they were working with the team or the group, whatever it was, the championship, and being able to kind of articulate who I was, where I was coming from, especially from a smaller school, having to describe, okay, here's where we are, here's what I'm studying in sport management, and that's kind of how it got started.
There's a couple of things that I want to just get into because number one, the retail experience and then your volunteer experience. So hopefully I'll keep myself on track by saying that out loud. I think the retail experience is fantastic because as far as I could tell, your customers that are coming into the hardware store, they're not all the same. You need to communicate and be able to communicate with a wide variety of people. They're all not going to be the same. So I think that's a great message. Am I here to say, hey, every high school and college student should go work in retail? Not necessarily, but an environment like that puts you in a position to learn, to adapt and listen to others. And not everyone's the same, the way they want to be spoken to or how they want to communicate. So I love that. And the other piece I wanted to mention is because, look, I've had the luxury of looking at your background, so I know it a little bit. But there's a great depth of the volunteer experience, ranging from Super Bowls to numerous other high-profile events. The question it jogged me to ask you a question of, Josh, was there anything that you did that you did, or maybe you got feedback on afterwards that led you to getting those volunteer opportunities? Maybe there was some way that you networked, that you aligned with people. Anything you can share?
Yeah. So well, first of all, let me touch on the retail side. I'm always going to give a shameless plug for working in retail or food service. I myself, people in my family, worked in that side through college or something like that, and it's tremendous experience for the things that are maybe going to apply to later positions. But when it comes to my volunteer experience, I really credit my sport management professor at Small Grace College in Winona Lake, Indiana, Dr. Darrell Johnson. He got in front of us early in my career there as a freshman. Fortunate to be at a small NAIA school that had a sport management undergrad, and now I believe they have a master's program. But to come in early and start to understand through his teaching the importance of not just classroom learning, but applying that in the real world and looking for ways. And it's not always going to be something that is going to be dropped in front of your lap. It's not always going to be something that's easy to find. For me, an easy connection was the Indiana Sports Corporation. There's still the Sports Commission there in Indianapolis and do a tremendous job hosting events. Obviously, in a non-COVID year, they were hosting plenty of events and needing lots of hands, doing even just small things throughout their fan experiences. And so that's how I jumped in early, understanding the importance of building a resume while in school. And it doesn't have to be a full-time internship to start. It can be small things like, hey, I was part of the fan experience for the Super Bowl in the convention center and doing things there. And so building a resume was important. But I think that part of what fueled that interest was being in classes or seeing fellow classmates that were graduating without too much experience and really trying to wrestle with that. And so I came to understand, hey, this is really something I believe in. This is what I want to be studying. I think even at that point, I didn't even know what specifically I wanted to do. I work in marketing now. I took 1 or 2 marketing classes in college, but other than that, any of my marketing experience has come from just that, from doing experiential things that built up over time. And so joining the Sports Corp as a volunteer was a huge step for me. But also just, I understand I was fortunate as well. I had family in Indianapolis, and so I was able to stay with them and work for free at some events, travel with some friends to golf tournaments out of state. And so had those tremendous opportunities that led to that first internship, which ended up being with the Indiana Sports Commission, our sports corporation. So it kind of culminated in that, but that certainly, at the beginning had been kind of a reaching goal of, hey, I would love to work there eventually in some capacity. But it took those small steps to get there.
Yeah, and I think it's a great piece of advice that I want to distill down real quick is, hey, build your resume while you're in school. Don't wait until after. Can I just add, without assuming anything, that along the way, Josh, you yourself, not only were building some practical experience that you could put on paper, but you're also making some connections. Fair to assume?
Fair to assume, yeah. And again, similar to the experiences themselves, those were connections that, while it might just be a offhand conversation here or there, you truly don't know who you're going to meet until you're in those circumstances, understanding that, hey, the person I reported to as a volunteer might be the volunteer coordinator, but they report to this person. And kind of starting, if nothing else, whether they were true connections, I could certainly use the experience I'd had to reach out and say, hey, I've had experience here. I saw that you were connected in this way. I would love to hear more about this. And so through a lot of that was through LinkedIn, or now even Twitter is a huge networking tool. And so, but again, similar to the experiences themselves, yes, understanding early on that, hey, you never know who you're going to run into. It's a matter of just being there and seeing who you can interact with.
Can you think back just for a moment, and then we'll move forward? But is there anything that that you did, or how did you position yourself that you think would have been, the way to differentiate yourself from others that were maybe in line for the same volunteer roles or for the same jobs? I'll let you decide if you want to pick your volunteer life or now, as you've got the years of experience as a true employee. What have you yourself done in terms of how you've marketed yourself, branded yourself, and how you've articulated those visions? How have you done that? And what's something that you could share to today's college students?
Right. I think one thing I would share, and this has just been based on my experience, but having come from a smaller school, and I took a year before I went to grad school at Illinois State. I spent a year at the University of Evansville in Southern Indiana, Missouri Valley Conference, and that school was in a different light, but in a similar fashion, a much smaller school compared to others, even in the Missouri Valley Conference. So I think for me, a huge part of, I don't want to oversimplify, but to how I got to where I am today was by being in places where I had to wear a ton of hats at the same time. There is a huge opportunity for students that are at larger schools to be a part of a large brand and have that opportunity. But for those that may not find themselves in that position, the chance to maybe have a closer relationship with their oversight because it's a smaller staff, and typically have a lot more hats to wear as a result. And I mean, when I look back at my University of Evansville days, our desks were in the physical ticket office. So I was working with tickets, but we were writing game scripts. We were producing graphics for social media and doing all this at the same time. And then when it comes to game day, escorting visiting teams, getting the officials taken care of. I mean, everything across the board, that when it came to looking for that first full-time opportunity, I could sit back and say, hey, yes, I'm still working on this master's degree, but I had this year out of undergrad. And for me, I took that year because I didn't honestly, I didn't really see grad school as something that immediately that I saw as something I wanted to do. It wasn't until I got through that year at Evansville and having a better chance to understand the different angles to college athletics in particular, that I realized kind of what that next step was. And so, again, that's where even in the interview process for my graduate assistant role at Illinois State, you talk about articulating that vision. It came out of that year at Evansville and some of those volunteer experiences saying, hey, I've worked with tickets. I understand the facilities and the operations side, but I know that marketing is my corner because of X, Y, and Z, because of what I've experienced. And so being able to take that experience and then be able to communicate it was crucial. And to this point, I mean, I've had full-time interviews for different full-time roles that were not as in-depth as the GA position that I was applying for. I mean, it was a phone interview, Skype, on-campus interview for a GA position at the time. So that was a really good experience for me early on of going through the ropes, having a full, 8-hour day itinerary with different groups and being able to, know how to handle each one. But that was really a tremendous experience. And then again, I came into Illinois State for a 2-year grad program, ended up staying 4 years in 3 different positions. So it really was a tremendous opportunity.
I rarely do it, but I'm going to do it today just because I feel like doing it. Just give me the gut reaction without overthinking it, just immediate reaction. Excuse me. When you hear today's college students come in and maybe they've got an opportunity to meet with you or interview with you and they say, I'll just do anything. I'll do whatever it takes. Versus, hey, I really want to learn more about XYZ. Do you have a take one way or the other?
Having had a couple of these conversations, I do like to have students or hear from them what it is that not that they have to have this scripted answer of, I want to go to these 10 different stops, but to have at least a targeted area of, hey, I love the marketing side, but what about social media do you like the best or whatever? So I will say in terms of articulating and communicating that, I love the fact that someone's open to doing the work, right? And they want to put in the work. They're willing to put in the time. That's honestly, in terms of the sports industry, that's step one of acknowledging, hey, this is going to be a little different. Sometimes holidays are going to be taken up, and understanding the hours that are in place. But I think, so someone with the work ethic is crucial. It's critical. But taking that to the next step of, I understand this in particular. And that for me was my experience of, okay, I've done these different things. I want to go this direction. And maybe for someone that hasn't had that, they're still going to have a bend one way or the other, most likely. So I'm open to taking any open slate, but it does help me help them grow if I know that there's a certain bend that I'm looking towards.
Gotcha. Today's students are in a unique scenario, obviously, just being in the environment of trying to network and trying to make connections, and everything is, for the most part, done virtually. Certain areas and pockets are not. But where do you draw the line personally? And again, just gut reaction. Everyone's trying to email or get on the radar of someone that they can connect with or interview with or what have you to continue that process. When it comes to email or phone calls or what have you, where do you personally draw the line versus someone that's, hey, this person's being persistent versus, you know what, this is becoming a little more of a nuisance? Where do you draw the line? It's just your opinion.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I don't really, it's been a while since I've ever had to draw the line, which is a good thing, I guess. And I'm always open to having conversations. I've had mentors that I've had tell me, and I've in turn told mentees of my own that, hey, I would let you know if you were hitting me up too much to talk. I would let you know if it was becoming too overwhelming. And I don't think it's ever gotten to that point. I think where I've seen things that I would like to see done differently, I would say for anyone in the professional realm, phone calls are great if we know they're coming. I'll just say that. So I'm never going to turn on a phone call if it's like, hey, shoot me an email. Let's set up a time next week, or even tomorrow if I know I have a time block available. Calendars can be of pretty high importance in our line of work, and so to know that, hey, I can set aside this time to really be locked into the conversation we're having versus picking up the phone, not knowing who it is, and wanting to make sure I say the right thing. So I would say emails are always welcome. A lot of us in this industry, we do get a lot of emails in a day, but I always want to take that time to be responding in an appropriate and a timely manner. And if that means, responding quickly, but saying, hey, this is my immediate answer to this question or my background, but hey, let's set up another time to talk if you're open to that. That's certainly been the practice within this membership development committee I'm a part of with NACMA in college athletics. It's the National Association for Collegiate Marketing Administrators, and there's a membership development committee that welcomes those new members, many of whom are young professionals. And so through that, we're contacting them saying, hey, let me tell you a little bit about myself, hear from you what it is you're looking for, which again brings them to a point of articulating why they're a member, why they joined. Maybe it was through their department or individual word of mouth. But sharing their vision with us, and multiple times now, those have extended into, hey, thanks for reaching out, but I'd love to actually ask you these questions on another phone call. Can we set up another time to talk? And so it really does just string itself along. But I think the more coordinated it is, the better. And I oftentimes will encourage my mentees to be the driving force of that relationship. Of, hey, you again, I would tell you if you were getting overboard. You tell me when you would like to talk, and I'll make time for that. But showing that initiative is important.
Yeah, there's just a fine line, I know, in students' minds, being a persistent versus being a pest of, well, I've already sent him or her a couple emails, I'll just relax. But anyway, everyone's got a different take on that. For today's students, again, we kind of know the climate that they're in and that they're trying to work within, which is challenging, right? It's challenging for everybody. What do you see that college students do in terms of how they approach you, or they don't know you? What do you see that's working well? And not to be negative, maybe what are some things that just you see, what, I wish they wouldn't do this. Does that make sense? I want to kind of try to keep it positive. So maybe focus on that if you don't mind. Let me rephrase the whole question. What do you see that students do that capture your attention? Maybe it's the way what they're saying in their email, or how they're leaving a voicemail, or when they get a chance to meet with you, they're doing something unique that captures your attention. What is that?
I think for me, it's a couple of things. For one, it's a general curiosity for what it is that we are doing and how they play a part, and kind of in tandem with that, just showing initiative. Those are two things that, and in no way to be beating down a certain generation, but those are things that stand out, right? You talk about finding ways to stand out from your peers, from your fellow classmates, when it comes to maybe intern interviews that we've had or graduate assistant interviews. For one, those opportunities that they have shown, hey, whether they came into our office or they were interviewing, or someone I talked to about that person can say, hey, yeah, they've done everything that we've asked of them. They actually came asking for more responsibility when it was appropriate, and they could take on more. And showing that curiosity for what we do, because as I mentioned, in an early stage of a career, like in college athletics, in my world specifically, having that curiosity early to try different things, even if it's not something that you necessarily were comfortable with before, that can take you places. And I think even for our current staff, our graduate assistants, a lot of them are now self-taught on social media management and graphic design, because, hey, we just needed bodies that could turn out a graphic and schedule things on Twitter. And so a lot of those things come with just on-the-job training. But I think things that have really stood out to me from this current generation are those who have reached out to me, and like you said, maybe it's been a couple months, but they said, hey, we talked about students, student marketing, whatever it was, back in the fall. I would love to set up another time to talk to you about social media or whatever it is. That to me, again, shows that they were listening, and that they had an idea of what they were looking for out of the last conversation. They apparently got that, and now they have something else they're curious about. I think being a sponge, and I still try to be a sponge myself with people that are ahead of me. So you never necessarily grow out of that. But I think starting that mentality and having that inner interest early on can really fuel you into future positions.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think there's something to be said. And I'm not saying this is a hidden message that you just kind of put in there, but it's making the connection is one element. It's maintaining or nurturing your relationships and your connections, staying in touch. As you said, someone may have gotten back to you, 2 months later after you'd first had a chance, or after they had a first chance to talk with you. So great point. Last question that I've got for you is this. Maybe there was a little nugget or some little pearl of wisdom that was shared to you that's timeless, that if there was any college student that walks through your door, you would share it with them. Anything come to mind?
I think outside of I think what's been hammered in terms of getting involved early, that's a huge one for me. I think the other thing is to simply be where your feet are. And because I know for me, that was a huge learning curve, especially when I was at Evansville, to just make a point to, instead of looking a year down the road, or for some college students, is instead of looking at the spring semester, look at where you are currently. What are you involved in? Who can you get to know better? What skills can you, especially in a COVID, quarantine type era, what can I work on now for the future? be where your feet are, and that'll grow into a mentality in a professional sense as well. I know, like I mentioned at Evansville, it was a 10-month position. I spent coming out of college, I was in Indianapolis for 8 months with a couple internships. I was at Evansville for 10 months. And so it was hard for me not to be thinking halfway through that year to be thinking, okay, where am I going to go after this? I mean, and I remember at a specific time, it was still late in the fall, I think, when I was at Evansville. And I was kind of keeping an eye on the job market to see, well, this is a single year position. I need to know what's coming. And my oversight, my boss at the time coming to me saying, hey, I know you're nervous about this, but just give me some time. Give me the time that you've agreed to, basically. Get us through basketball season, and we'll make sure you're taken care of, kind of thing. And that has carried with me from that time on, of just because it's so natural to, okay, you achieve that next thing, whether it's graduating undergrad or it's getting that first post grad internship or graduate position, whatever. And so you're naturally gonna put your feet there, but be thinking 2 steps ahead. And you could lose out on some valuable connections, valuable chances to again, articulate what you're growing in and build those relationships that can come around in the future, not only with those that are ahead of you, but those right around you. I had to learn that lesson too of, hey, my fellow graduate assistants, I was in a pretty big program at Illinois State, and a lot of them, a lot of my fellow graduate assistants were going to be people that I could stay in touch with moving forward that are now, spread all over the country. So it's not losing sight of where you are now for the sake of what could come next, because you may not get that next thing if you don't spend your time well where you are.
Absolutely. Excellent stuff. Josh, I would personally look forward to staying in touch with you. Maybe we can do another one of these somewhere down the road. I always offer anyone that comes on, certainly people that are into intercollegiate athletics are going to know who SMU is. But if there's anything, maybe there's an initiative, maybe there's a blog, maybe there's a site that you want to drive people to, or to you personally, I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to share anything, commercial away, whatever you'd like to do. I want to make sure I give you the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, SMU has been a great spot. SMUmustangs.com is our website. We're really proud right now, and it's coming to a close with this football season. But the Born and Raised campaign has been something that we've really been pushing through the football channels, and really proud of our work here in the DFW Metroplex. But all of our information can be found at SMUmustangs.com, and SMU Mustangs on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. So always happy to plug the Mustangs, everything we got going on there.
Excellent. Well, your name is on the screen, and now it's Talk Shop that's there for anyone that'd like to learn more about SMU. Please go to that website. You just mentioned it. So, Josh Remington, I appreciate you sharing some great insight that I know college students can take and hopefully take to heart and use in their process as they move along. So, thank you again for taking the time and joining me right here.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.